Hey business math guys, we are checking 3.11a and b. You should have done those yesterday. That was Monday, the 6th. So you have an assessment to take online today, but also let's just kind of go over some of those answers since you guys don't have answers in the back of your book, I'm guessing. Okay, well, so let's just jump right in and try to make this short since you also have to take an assessment. I will not go over in total depth all 6 of these, but I will go over for the first one how to do it and then give you the answers for the other ones, and then hopefully going through one of them will help if you miss some, and then you can apply that same information to the other 5. So we're going to look at numbers 1 through 6 from 3.11a. This is on page 339. 339, pretend that's a 3. Okay, so for number 1, you're given the principal, the interest rate, the time, marginal tax rate, and the inflation rate. And if you look at the previous page, the example walks you right through it, tells you exactly which information you need to multiply, add, all that kind of stuff. These are straightforward, just plug and chug, but we'll go over them together. So you're given that information. We're looking for the expected growth return. Okay, so I'm just going to abbreviate that. Okay, the expected gross return is going to be your amount of investment. In this case, it's $10,000. That's your principal. The amount of investment is the same thing as your principal. And then you're going to multiply that by the rate of return. And the rate of return is something that you are just going to be given in the problem, and we have often referred to it as just the interest rate. Okay, that's what amount, what percentage is being returned to you. That's why they phrase it that way, but it's just the interest rate. So, oops, that is not working. Okay, so $sign here, and then the interest rate was 8%, but we're going to write it as a decimal when we multiply the two. Okay, and when you multiply those out, you should get $800. Make sure you use a $sign. Okay, now the second part of number 1 is the expected after tax return. Okay, I don't really think that's a beautiful looking abbreviation, but let's just go with it for now. So if we're expecting, which is what we just came up with here, if this is our expected gross return, our expected after-tax return is going to be when we take that tax away. So we're going to need to start with $800, okay, and we're going to subtract something. We're going to subtract the amount of taxes, but we don't know the amount of taxes quite yet. What we're given is a marginal tax rate, and we also have that as a percent, and we will need to turn it into a decimal. So before we can subtract the taxes, we're going to need to take the expected gross return, so $800, and we're going to multiply it by the marginal tax rate as a percent. So in this case, it was 24%, so make that into a decimal, okay? And when you multiply those out, go ahead and use a calculator for this. If you want to speed up just so that we're focusing on the process right now, we get $192, okay? So if we have 800, and now this is the amount of taxes that I can expect to have to pay, so I'm not really going to get all of that back. The government takes some of it. So I want to start with my 800 number, and I'm going to subtract, looking for all my erasers and things here. Okay, now I'm going to subtract my $192 amount, and you should get $608 for the second part of, let me try to make this a little more clear here. So here's the first part for number 1, and here's the second part for number 1. Okay, and we still have one more. We still need the expected real return. Okay, so our expected real return has a couple different spots that we need to do here. So the first thing I need to look at is the last piece of information I haven't used yet, and that's the inflation rate. So the inflation rate expects it to go up 6%, but if I have 6%, it's not only 6% of that, it's 6% plus what you still had. So if you have 100% of something and I'm going to add 6%, well, that gives me 106%. So that's the number I'm going to use, or the value that is going to be some amount of what value you invested somewhere. So we're going to need to start with a couple numbers. I know this is all over the place, so just hang in there with me. Again, it's the same process for each one. Start with $10,000 because that was our principal. Okay, that's the amount. Then we're going to add, and I think I like the way that page 338 sets it up. Then we're going to add the expected after-tax return, and we just solved for that. That's our $608. So translate this. You put $10,000 in some investment. You expect to get $608 after return. So if you were getting $800 from the interest, but then taxes ended up being $192, they basically tax your interest. It's money that you're making. So if you go to a job and you make money, you get your paycheck and you look at your amount that you made and you look at your total on your check and it's not the same. They've taken some out for taxes. So that's the same thing. When you earn interest, you are essentially making money. You're earning it, and so the government will also tax that. So $192 of that interest goes to the government, so you really only make $608. So it makes sense that if we have the original investment, $10,000, plus the $608 that we're adding to it, just by the fact that we invested it, is going to be how much we make, right? Well, this here is, that's wrong, is 106% of what number? Okay, and that basically means if we make this much and the expected inflation rate is 6%, I want to know, hey, this amount that I make, is this keeping up with inflation? So if inflation goes up 6%, that basically means that things are going to cost more, people are going to make more. Every year there's a percentage of inflation that happens. You've probably heard that term thrown out. And so your money isn't quite worth the exact same amount. If you've ever heard your grandparents talking about how much it costs to go get a piece of candy from the penny store, or a nickel or a dime, kind of things like that, you can't just go buy a Hershey bar for a penny right now. If you can, let me know and we'll go eat a bunch of chocolate together. But that's inflation, right? So it costs more now. So you are investing a certain amount, you're making a certain amount off of that investment from just the interest rate. Some of that goes to the government. And I want to say, hey, I've made some, that's really great, but because of inflation, what's my expected real return? How much is it really going to be worth? Or the real value of that investment, I guess, is a good way to say it. Okay, you still are making that dollar amount. That dollar amount isn't changing. It's just not necessarily worth the same amount. Okay, so we're setting this up. I'm going to kind of move over here a little bit. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, so if I'm going to say is another word, I'll come back here. Is another word for equal sign, right? Is, okay? And this, another way to say 106% is just to say 1.06 as a decimal, okay? So what I'm basically saying is $10,000, you know, and I'm just going to go straight to adding these together. $10,608. Okay, again, that's just this part right here. Okay, is 106% of what amount? So is, that's 1.06, remember that's still a percent but written as a decimal, of what amount? Of means to multiply, and it's some number that's unknown. Okay, and I'm just going to use x. You can use whatever variable you want. So essentially, in order to solve for this unknown here, you could set this up as a proportion as well, but we're going to have to divide to undo that. And hopefully you followed these steps earlier. Thanks for hanging in there with me if you did understand this okay, and we're working through it a little bit. So $10,608 divided by 1.06 should be a little bit less than its original amount. So we're going to get $10,008. $10,008 here, I guess I should do this in yellow to be consistent, is my expected real return. Okay, so a little recap. I know there's a lot. My expected gross return is $800. After I give some to the government, it's $608. That's the expected after-tax return. And the expected real return, basically how much will it be worth? And really, I guess just how much is it worth? And we talked about that after the effect of what inflation has on us, right, is $10,008. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. We're going to just kind of go over some more of these answers here. And if you need another step-by-step, look at page 338. Walk through number 1 with us again, or please feel free to reach out. I know it's awkward to text your teacher or to Instagram her or whatever it might be, but please reach out. I would be happy to help you. All right, number 2, I'm just going to kind of go through these answers now, okay? So the expected gross return, this is where we took our $15,000 and we multiplied it by 0.09. Remember, your interest rate has to be a decimal. Should give you, all is in dollars for all of these, $1,350. All right, once you took the tax off of this, if our marginal tax rate is 23%, and again, all of these I think are, they're all 1 year, so you don't have to worry about anything else for that. Okay. Once we multiply that by our marginal tax rate as a decimal, so 0.23, our expected after-tax return is, now again, it should always be less. If your second number is larger than your first one, you did something wrong, go back and check. Because we have to give the government some money, they're not giving us some. All right, $1,039.50. Again, if you are just ever so slightly off for some of these for a penny or something like that, it might be a rounding thing, so that's all right. Okay, and then the expected real return, this was the one that was a little bit longer. You took your principal, the $15,000, and then we added on the expected after-tax return, that $1,039.50, and then we had to set it equal to 108% or 1.08. So essentially we are taking those two dollar values, adding them together, and then dividing by 1.08, and that should give you $14,851. Okay, number 3, I'm going to give you the same, just go through the answers here, but they're just going to be the same order. I'm not going to label them every time. You should have $300. You should have $249 for your after-tax, and your expected real return is $4,999. Okay, number 4 here. Expected gross return was $18,000. Your after-tax is $12,240. Again, a quick little check. Is that smaller than the first number? Yes, it is. Good. And your expected real return is $100,214. Alrighty, number 5. Same order again. You should have $675. Again, this number is smaller. You should have $573.75, and then your expected real return, this number, if you're checking, should always be larger than your principal, should be $7,617. All right, and number 6, your expected gross return was $3,750. Your expected after tax was $2,962.50. And lastly, your real return, checking to make sure this is larger than your principal, is $26,133. I hope you did all right on those. Please go ahead and click on the link for the assessment, and you will need to answer some of those questions. Give me a little bit of feedback. I am not giving you any questions over this specific stuff here. We still have to do B. I'm sorry. Because we just learned it. Okay, so practice a little bit more, and it'll probably be on your next quiz that's coming up after Easter here. So, again, still working on these, but fill out that online assessment, and we will get a little feedback from some of the other stuff that we've been doing. So this is not completely forgotten about, but I just want to give you a little bit more time to work through it as we're going over these answers just now. Okay? All right, so let's go over B. I know I said earlier that we weren't, so sorry, almost there. Hang in there with me. Okay, so let's take a look. The only thing that's going to change here is inflation for each problem, so I'm just going to solve the beginning part here once. So you're given principal, interest rate, time, and the as 1 year, and then the marginal tax rate is 24%. So in order to find some of our original information, we can't really find the expected real return until we have both the taxes and the expected after-tax return, so you have to start there. So we're going to take our $10,000, our original amount, multiply it by 0.08, and these numbers are familiar because we did them earlier. We're expecting to make $800 in interest. However, the government is going to take 24% of that. This is the marginal tax rate. So 800 times that as a decimal, 0.24 is $192. When I subtract from the 800 I was expecting, or not expecting, but I guess thinking I would get in terms of percentage, I'm going to take away $608 from that. So then I need to add those two together and divide it by my inflation percentage added to 100% and written as a decimal. So the same thing is going to happen every single time here. And if you see there's a pattern, and we're just kind of evaluating at what inflation rate you still are going to make a little bit of money. You've invested your money. But it could be that at some inflation rate, you actually don't take away as much as you put in after an investment. So that investment was helpful, and you were able to, you didn't lose as much money. You were able to make some of an interest, but inflation went up more than your interest. And that's something that over long-term periods of time we want to consider. If your money is just sitting in a bank making a little bit of interest, it's probably not even enough to keep up with inflation. So it's really important to have your money invested somewhere and invested well. All right, anyways, so let's take a look at number 1. We're going to add those two together. I wrote it out every time, but you're going to do the same thing. I guess I should have parentheses around all of these. You have to add that first before you can divide. So you're going to take that 10,608 and divide it by 1.02. So we are going to get $10,400. If there's a 2% inflation rate, this is what we can expect to have as a real return. Okay, so if that inflation rate goes up to 3%, we are going to have a smaller amount, right? If the inflation is bigger, your money is worth a little bit less. So $10,299 is what you should have gotten for number 2. If the inflation rate's 4%, then we are going to make $10,200 approximately. Again, this is just what that dollar amount is worth, expected real return. Number 4 at 5% would be 10,103. Again, it should continue to go down every time, and it is. So if your numbers don't go down in this case as the inflation goes up, just check that. Okay, for number 5, we're almost breaking even in the sense that my rate here is my real return is $10,008. And now at 7%, this is where it kind of takes a turn for the worst. The expected real return at a 7% inflation rate, if my interest rate is at 8%. Now you might think, oh, 8%, that's bigger than 7%. I should be good. It's not really how it works, just because of taxes for the most part. So that's, I know, sad news. But for number 6, you should have had $9,914. And so at that point, I mean, at least you didn't lose more, but you put $10,000 in your principal, and you're walking away with an expected real return. Again, you still technically have a larger amount. You still have $10,608, but it's probably not worth as much. Okay, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Go take your exam. Have a great Easter break.